An aspiring young rapper vanishes without a trace.
He had went to a friend's house, and that was the last time that she saw him.
I was posting on Facebook and telling everybody that my brother was missing.
His criminal record makes police think he may have been running from his problems.
She said he had put a gun to her 9-month pregnant belly.
But when an informant comes forward, the case takes a different turn.
I asked, what can you tell me? And it was an information bomb. He's been shot 4 times. At least one of those shots was in the back.
I kind of was numb when I heard about it.
And the evidence points to a killer driven by rage and desire.
She had been texting him about where was he and who was he with. Her rage was building over the course of those hours.
I think something just kind of broke inside her mind.
She killed him, disposed of him, and then helped everybody look for his body. That's just next level evil.
It's December 22nd, 2021 in Columbia, South Carolina. While most residents are getting ready for Christmas, 29-year-old Taylor-Wardlaw is on the phone to police about her missing boyfriend, Terrell Sims.
We got the call from Taylor-Wardlaw that Terrell had gone missing. She said that he had last been seen 2 days prior at her house, where they lived together.
Taylor says she's just now calling because she initially wasn't worried. Terrell often leaves with his friends for days at a time.
He had gotten back home from a friend's house. Taylor said that Terrell left around, 6 or 7 in the morning, and she says that's the last time that she saw him. Taylor says that their relationship is not perfect, but they're in love and they don't really have problems. Taylor suggested that Terrell kind of lived by his own rules. So for him to be gone for one day wouldn't necessarily cause too much alarm with her. The unusual part is that he wasn't contacting anybody. He wasn't answering the phone.
Now, she's afraid something might be wrong.
You could tell that she seemed to be in distress, worried.
Missing person reports are considered high priority. The Special Victims Unit investigators began looking into the case.
At the initial start of a missing persons investigation, our Special Victims Unit would check hospitals. We'll start talking with their friends, what kind of history they have, anything that gives us a pattern of life or background into who they are.
Terrell Davon Sims was born July 6, 1995 in Columbia, South Carolina. 5 minutes later, he was followed by his twin sister, Marcella.
Terrell and Marcella never stayed in the crib. They always found a way out of the crib. I'm trying to get to Terrell, and Marcella done went this way. So, I was like, they twins.
But their family would face tragedy early on.
Terrell and Marcella were babies when our mom passed. I had just turned 10, and she was in the hospital ever since Thanksgiving. I think it was December the 18th, 1995, when she passed.
When the twins were just 4 years old, their father died as well, making them and their older sister Rose orphans.
Me, my brother, and my sister had to go live with our aunt. We took care of each other.
Growing up, I had a lot of responsibilities with Terrell and Marcella. I would try to help out as much as I could.
Though their childhood was not easy, the siblings took solace in each other.
Terrell used to cheer me up because I was more softer and he was a little bit more tougher. He would always make me laugh and lift me up.
As a teenager, Terrell's skill at making others laugh served him well in school.
He was like one of those type of students that like to make people laugh in the classroom. Always getting in trouble. Terrell was a class clown.
Terrell's natural charm made him popular with the women in his life as well.
He was a ladies' man. He was loving, sweet, funny, and he would date different girls, and that's just how he was.
When I met Terrell Sims, I'd seen this boy running around in the neighborhood with no shirt on, and he just drove my attention. He was so polite. I told him my name, and I told him that I liked him, and ever since then, we was unstoppable.
When his aunt's health began to fail, Terrell dropped out of school to care for her.
She needed him, so he didn't turn his back on her. Anything that she needed, he was right there.
After his aunt died in 2016, Terrell left home to start a life for himself. He found an apartment in the Columbia Section 8 housing development known as the Colonies.
It's for the low-income people. They help you and stuff like that.
Terrell did work at the hibachi restaurant. He would talk about the things that he would do, like wash dishes and stuff and clean up.
Terrell did what he needed to make ends meet, but his true passion lay in music.
Terrell loved to come up with different rhymes, and he would always try to get me to listen to it. Terrell could sing. He used to always sing during church and all types of stuff.
He was good. Terrell just loved music.
Being a musician helped his image as a ladies' man as well. By the time he was 23, Terrell had fathered 3 children.
Terrell had different baby moms, different children. He would feed them, cook for them, take care of them.
Terrell loved all his kids, but Terrell just wasn't ready to settle down. Terrell didn't find that special one.
In 2018, Terrell seemed to finally meet his match, a single mother named Taylor-Wardlaw.
She moved from New York to the Colonies. Terrell, one day, him and his homeboy was walking down the block, and he seen Taylor and the other girl, and he drew attention to Taylor, and then they were talking ever since.
Taylor, she grew up in the Bronx, and she came from a good home. She was just family-oriented. When I first met Taylor, she just always wanted to be like an entrepreneur. You know, she wants to be her own boss. She had like a good head on her shoulders. She always gave me this vibe that like, you know, she always had it going for herself. My son with Taylor was born June 2014. We was just taking care of him as like a whole, co-parenting, everything.
When that relationship ended, Taylor moved south for a new start. Before long, she'd met and fallen in love with Terrell.
She took care of him. Terrell would brag about how she could cook all the time.
I felt like Taylor was a step up for him. He was doing a little better with her. He started to really want for himself more.
In 2020, they had a child together. And though neither were first-time parents, they were overjoyed to start their own family. After dating for 2 years, it seemed Terrell wanted to be more than just a father.
That's when Terrell moved in with Taylor. Taylor would go to work in the morning and Terrell would stay home and watch the kids. And then Terrell would go to work at the hibachi restaurant. And then Taylor would take the kids.
Taylor, she wanted to be the person that he spent the rest of his life with. My first impression of her as I got to know her, it was like, oh, she's stuck on him.
They had just moved into a new house together. They had this new baby together. So they seemed like they were moving in the right direction.
Now, just 3 days before Christmas, Terrell is missing, and no one seems to know where he is.
That ain't like Terrell. No matter where Terrell is, Terrell always lets somebody know where he at.
Taylor doesn't know exactly how he left the house. He had been dropped off by a friend, and she's not sure if a friend picked him up.
But according to Taylor, there might be a good reason why Terrell isn't talking to anyone. It seems their once perfect relationship had recently taken a turn for the worse.
She said that Terrell was on bond for domestic violence.
He had previously gotten out of jail a few months prior to going missing. Terrell and Taylor had, at times, a tumultuous relationship. At that point, she's worried that he may have gotten up and left town.
Coming up, a look into Terrell's life hints at unspoken tensions.
We got the idea that Terrell wanted to find a way out.
And a new witness comes forward with disturbing allegations.
Taylor said that Terrell had come home late and they got into some sort of argument.
"48 hours after the last known sighting of Terrell Sims, investigators respond in person to learn more information from his girlfriend, Taylor-Wardlaw. Taylor tells investigators that she and Terrell had a tumultuous history, and about 18 months ago, it turned violent.
Police reports indicated that the summer of 2020, Taylor called the police to report a domestic violence event. She relayed to them that he had put a gun to her 9-month pregnant belly, threatened her life.
There was nothing other than the statement to corroborate what happened. This was a he said, she said kind of situation. Ultimately, he was arrested because they did develop probable cause.
Terrell had a few misdemeanors, but the charge of domestic violence seemed like a large step from his other charges.
Records show Terrell sat in jail for almost a year before posting bail, missing the birth of their child. He was released 4 months prior in August of 2021, but is currently facing charges of domestic violence of an aggravated nature.
And he had an ankle monitor. In this case, there's an exclusion zone that's set, and people that are on ankle monitor, they cannot go within 1,000 feet of the victim's address.
There was a strict no contact provision in his bond, so he was not supposed to be in contact with Taylor, certainly not living with her. And of course, he was.
Taylor never updated her address with the ankle monitor company, so that was how they circumvented being able to maintain the relationship after he bonded out.
To investigators, avoiding being caught violating the terms of his bond seems like a compelling reason for Terrell to disappear. The question is, why he hasn't contacted Taylor or his family.
We found out that Taylor was actually the one that posted the bond for Terrell back in August.
She stayed in contact with him the entire time he was in jail.
Taylor was actually trying to get the case tossed out. She even told us specifically that facts were wrong, it was a mistake.
She said that she did not feel threatened by him and that she wanted him back in the home so he could be a dad to their newborn.
When those domestic violence things started coming up, I was surprised because he never bruised at me, and we've been together a long time.
Terrell wouldn't pull no gun out on Taylor. He wouldn't do that.
According to Taylor, she and Terrell had been trying to patch things up. On December 20th, authorities received a call from the ankle monitoring company, but it wasn't a top priority for them.
It's just an automatic notification to our office, but police had no information about whether he was involved in any sort of altercation or arguments with anybody else.
Per protocol, Terrell's listed contacts were also notified.
My cousin called me and told me that they called her about the ankle monitor being temporary, being cut off. So I got on the phone and I called Taylor.
Taylor was already aware that his ankle monitor had been cut off, and she knew that the last point of the ping, the 6600 block of Monticello Road. That area of Monticello Road is pretty rural, spaced out. There's a lot of big properties, a lot of woods, a lot of creeks, a lot of streams.
Taylor tells officers she got the notification 48 hours ago on the 20th, which means by now, Terrell could be anywhere. Columbia police put out a statewide alert for other agencies to be on the lookout.
At the time, we're dealing with COVID. People are calling out of work. So we're having to work on modified schedules.
Since police don't have the resources for a manhunt, Terrell's sisters take matters into their own hands.
I was posting on Facebook and telling everybody that my brother was missing.
With Terrell missing for 48 hours, Taylor takes to social media to organize a search of her own.
Normally when a person go missing, you be like, okay, let's get together as a family and let's find him. It was none of that.
Taylor had posted on Facebook as well that she was organizing a search party for Terrell, and it was around the area of Monticello Road because that was his last known location.
On December 28th, the social media blitz seems to pay off.
In the middle of the night, Columbia Police Department got an unexpected visitor at headquarters who wanted to speak with an investigator. She said that she might have some information regarding Terrell's whereabouts.
She says he's in fact dead, and she knows who did it.
Over a week after Terrell Sims' disappearance, a mysterious informant comes forward alleging that Terrell is dead. The case is immediately reassigned to Sergeant Mitch Henry with the Violent Crime Unit.
I sat her down, and I always start my interviews very open-ended. What can you tell me? And it was an information bomb. The first thing that she tells me is that Taylor, who is a friend to her, as well as a male that she knew by the name Youngsta, came to her house pretty late that night.
She says they sat in her car talking for a while. Then, Taylor suddenly made a startling confession.
Taylor told her, I did it. I killed Terrell. The witness says that Taylor said that he had come home late and they got into some sort of argument.
She thought that he was cheating on her. Taylor told her that he had hit her. And so she said she shot him. She had shot him 4 times, but one of them missed.
At the time, Taylor's car was in the shop. She had a rental car. And she said that one of these bullets actually went through the siding of the house outside and struck the front hood of her rental vehicle.
According to the witness, Youngsta helped Taylor get rid of the evidence.
The witness didn't get the impression that he had anything to do with the killing, but did help Taylor move the body.
Youngster tells Taylor, I know a spot where we can dump him. So as they're driving out there, it's a good 30, 40 minutes from Terrell and Taylor's home. They remove the ankle monitor from Terrell's leg and toss it out a window.
Taylor told her that they dumped the body off of an embankment in a small creek off of Monticello Road.
With the increased media attention, Taylor is desperate to go back and make sure her tracks are covered.
According to the witness, Taylor asked her to help move the body to a different location, which the witness was refusing to do.
The witness told us the area that the ankle monitor presumably would be, which is an area near Crane Creek.
The witness says they then went their separate ways, but Taylor and Youngsta left something behind.
They both accidentally left their cell phones in the car. That's why she just showed up in the middle of the night, because she didn't want to be involved. So she gave them to us.
Without knowing the involvement of these phones, we decided to collect them as evidence and send them off for forensic processing.
While search teams comb the area around the creek looking for Terrell's body, Sergeant Henry digs further into Taylor's background.
She grew up in the Bronx. The Bronx is gritty. The Bronx is violent. She got into trouble. She grew up fighting. She always had that hostility in her.
Taylor, she didn't have any arrests, but she did own a gun. She had a concealed weapons permit.
We looked through pawn shop databases and just to see if any transactions had been made. And the day that Terrell supposedly went missing, Taylor had actually gone and pawned his grill. You haven't seen him, you're starting to get worried that he might be missing, but you're out here selling one of his favorite pieces of jewelry.
When detectives ask Terrell's loved ones what they think of his relationship with Taylor, they're less than complimentary.
Terrell's sisters kind of painted Taylor as very controlling.
Terrell was never the type of person to be with one woman, and Taylor knew that.
Taylor would do different things as far as tracking, monitoring his calls. She would do a lot of stuff to keep tabs on him. Like, he couldn't do nothing without her knowing.
Terrell been trying to end the relationships with her for a while. And I don't think Taylor could accept the fact that Terrell didn't want to be with her no more.
We knew who the suspect was. We were in communication with Taylor. We just had to prove that it was her.
As Sergeant Henry wraps up his interviews, he gets a call from the search team. They haven't found Terrell's body yet, but they have found something else.
They were able to locate this ankle monitor about a mile up from the creek. It gave a lot more credibility to our witnesses' statement, and we were able to actually pull some data off of that device.
You could track his movements. We see that Terrell went to Irwin Street, then he went to his friend's house, and then he came back to Taylor's house.
He came home around like 4 in the morning. The last time that Terrell's ankle monitor pinged was on Monticello Road around 7:45 a.m.
The discovery tells investigators they're close to locating Terrell, but they have a daunting task ahead.
So while we've narrowed down our search area, it's still a very large swath of area of creek beds and forest, and we don't have necessarily the same resources to conduct that search.
Coming up, investigators identify Taylor's alleged accomplice.
His real name is Eddie Brown.
And it seems they both had a potential motive.
She was planning to leave Terrell for Eddie. She had just had enough.
With the discovery of Terrell Sims' ankle monitor, investigators are becoming convinced Taylor-Wardlaw is a suspect in a potential homicide. But without a body to prove it, they need to proceed with caution.
We're ready to talk to Taylor, but we're not ready to interrogate her yet. We want to talk to her just as a follow-up to the missing persons investigation. We don't want her to have any semblance that we're onto her as a homicide suspect.
We need to know what she knows without her knowing that we know that.
Taylor pretty much gives us the same story that she gave the initial investigator.
Since Taylor is sticking to her story, detectives turn their attention to her alleged accomplice.
I asked the witness if she knew who Youngster was, and she had met him a few times previously, but didn't have a, official name for him. Investigator Nowlin is very good at identifying and finding people, so I said, well, what better person to try and figure out Youngster's identity? Another one of my team members, they started calling up all the local rental car agencies to see if anyone had rented a car to Taylor. And sure enough, one did. And they said, yeah, when we got the car, it had some sort of damage to the hood that she didn't report. It's a bullet hole, just like the witness said it would be. We process portions of the car with a compound that will illuminate in the presence of blood. And we found that there were traces in the trunk of the car.
They can't be sure the blood is Terrell's until it's tested. As samples are sent to the lab for analysis, investigator Nowlin is having a breakthrough of her own.
The witness said that Youngster had assisted in dumping his body, and she gave us his Facebook name. I did my due diligence and went to Taylor's Facebook page and located one of her friends that was Youngster, and I identified him.
His real name is Eddie Brown. At the time, he lived with his aunt in the Colony Apartments.
Taylor had several Facebook pages that interacted with Eddie Brown.
Investigator now was able to ascertain that Eddie may have a more romantic connection to Taylor. Now we're looking at someone that may have premeditated this murder for romantic interest.
Nowlin checks security camera footage at the apartment complex on the day Terrell disappeared and makes another discovery.
The rental car came into the Colony Apartments at 4:33 in the morning, was there for 10 minutes.
You could see Taylor getting out of her car with her 2 children and take them inside of Youngster's apartment.
When she comes out, the kids are still in there, but she and Eddie get back into the car and they drive off.
Based on what the witness told us, we believed at that point when she comes in to pick Eddie up at 4:30 in the morning, Terrell's already dead.
The rental car appears outside the apartments again around 8:30 a.m., giving Taylor and Youngsta plenty of time to get rid of Terrell's body. The question is, where?
While we're canvassing, we found a camera right on Monticello, and we just on a whim decided, let's pull this footage.
We see Taylor's rental car with a bullet hole in the front of it, driving outbound Monticello. And then coming back within about 20 minutes.
And we tried to create a map of how far can you get from this camera box, drive 10 minutes away, and drive 10 minutes back. And with that, we decided to organize a multi-jurisdictional search party. We started calling in other assets from the state. We had drones that were up. We had divers dredging through some of the creeks.
We have boats, we have helicopters, we have planes. We have more people than I can even count.
On January 5th, investigator Nowlin makes a gruesome discovery.
The search team had checked off all of the areas that they were designated to search. So I just followed Shavers Creek. I pulled up there and I looked down and see a trash bag with what looked like a body in it.
After over 2 weeks of searching, investigators have just discovered the body of Terrell Sims in an embankment.
Because it was so cold and the creek was so shallow, it actually preserved his body very well.
There were still a lot of features that were still evident. Tattoos could still be seen. And we can still make out that, yes, that is Terrell.
Once the body is recovered, officers are able to make a positive identification while they await autopsy results. For Terrell's loved ones, the news is devastating.
I've been crying and going through emotions before because I already felt like he was gone. So when I heard that, it was like I was numb.
I'm glad they found him, rather than them not finding him at all. It was emotional, but at the same time, was a little bit of justice.
Later that day, Taylor-Wardlaw is arrested and charged with murder.
When we arrested her, she had been on the phone. All she did was just say, I'm gonna have to call you back. She knew the game was up at that point.
Taylor immediately asks for a lawyer.
Do you wish to talk to us?
Yeah, but I still want a lawyer because I don't know why I'm here.
Okay. So you want a lawyer?
Mhm.
On January 5th, 2022, a body that was believed to be the victim was located in Shavers Creek.
He's dead?
While Taylor is held in custody, investigators proceed to search the home for any evidence of a struggle.
There was a gun box for a 9mm Ruger in a safe in the house, but the gun was unaccounted for.
There was one swab from the living room door frame that presumptively tested positive for blood that came back to Terrell Sims' profile.
While investigators make plans to speak to Eddie Brown, the medical examiner's autopsy report gives them an idea of what happened in the apartment.
Once the autopsy is conducted, it gives us an estimate about how long he's been deceased. which had been, at this point, roughly 2 weeks. It tells us he's been shot 4 times. At least one of those shots was in the back.
The projectiles that were collected were consistent with being fired from a 9mm.
It's possible that the first shots were to the front, but somebody that is running away, there's no justification to shoot them in the back.
All of that just goes to show a cover-up of a killing versus if it was self-defense.
In the days that follow, 30-year-old Eddie Youngsta Brown is apprehended and questioned by police.
Eddie was nervous. He knew that he didn't kill Terrell. He didn't want to go down for that.
He did provide a statement, eventually admitting what his role was in this, which was assisting Taylor in putting the body from the home into the trunk of the car and then removing the monitor and assisting her with dumping the body into the creek.
Based off of our interview with him, we were confident that we had enough evidence to get a conviction for accessory after the fact to the murder. So we ended up charging him with that.
Eddie is released on bond while prosecutors prep the case for trial.
While waiting for trial, we're starting to get back some of the results from the forensic exams that we've done, specifically on the cell phones.
Taylor's phone records reveal a woman consumed by jealousy and thoughts of murder.
This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. She had been contemplating this for a while.
When prosecutors review the evidence, witness statement, and video surveillance footage, it's clear to them Taylor-Wardlaw conspired to kill her boyfriend, Terrell Sims. The final piece of the puzzle is motive, which her cell phone records provide.
We started to get back text messages, emails, different exchanges between Taylor and Eddie. And what we come to learn is there was a relationship going on between Taylor and Eddie. She was planning to, in some capacity, leave Terrell for Eddie.
Taylor might have been cheating with another man, but that didn't mean she could handle the thought of Terrell with another woman.
The only motive that we could clearly see was just her anger towards him that she thought he was cheating on her. She had been texting him in the days leading up about why he wasn't coming home and where was he and who was he with.
Everything that we gathered from her phone, it was just, she was jealous. If I can't have you, nobody can.
To the prosecution, Taylor was a powder keg waiting to explode. And it finally happened on December 20th.
She was calling him over and over and over that night. I'm sure that her rage was building over the course of those hours.
In her text messages, there's no outright premeditation being said, but it's the reading between the lines.
She's texting Eddie while this is all going on, saying that she thinks he's out cheating on her. He finally came home around 3:30, and then there's no phone activity for about 33 minutes.
We'll never truly know what happened that night. My best working theory is an argument broke out between him and Taylor. Taylor could have started it because of her insecurities and worries about his infidelity. I think something just kind of broke inside her mind. So we believe Taylor snapped. She pulled out a gun and shot him. She obviously had a plan because she knew to go immediately to Eddie. I think that she had just had enough.
After she convinced Eddie to help her get rid of Terrell's body, Taylor came up with a cover story and reported him missing.
I think it's really crazy how she killed him, disposed of him, and then helped everybody look for his body. That's just next level evil.
Taylor spends the next 2 years in jail awaiting trial.
It was very obvious in this case that they were going to go the route of self-defense, considering that he was already on an ankle monitor for allegedly assaulting her a year and a half prior. But if this was truly someone that she was scared of, then why would you call him so many times that night?
In an unexpected turn of events, the case never makes it to court. On March 25, 2024, Taylor cuts a deal with prosecutors and pleads guilty to voluntary manslaughter. She's sentenced to 20 years in prison.
I felt like the time they gave Taylor wasn't enough. I felt like justice wasn't served enough for him.
I thank God that she did plead guilty. It's not like I was happy, but I know God has the last say so.
She didn't have to do what she did. Regardless, she can't see her kids, and they'll be adults by the time she come out. So whether it was justice or not, there's losses in both places.
Terrell, he was a good person. I mean, he might not have been perfect, but if he can do anything to help anybody, that's what Terrell would do.
I would miss his laughs, his random text messages, sending me pictures of his kids, joking. We was robbed of more memories, more time.
Never heard the full strength of the case. That key testimonies were never presented. Chad Carr walked out of that jail a free man. But this is not over. Double jeopardy does not apply to a grand jury's decision. Investigators are still working. They have DNA from that shower drain that does not belong to anyone who lived in that house. They are holding it close to their chests, waiting for the technology, or the one missing piece of evidence, to lock the door on Chad Carr for good. When asked if he killed Brittany, Chad has never explicitly denied it. He has only said, "You won't find my DNA." That is not the response of an innocent man. That is a response of a predator who thinks he washed his tracks clean enough. Brittany McGlone was a 19-year-old girl who wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to spend her life healing people. Instead, her life was cut short in a quiet bedroom by a coward who could not control his own dark impulses. Her family is still waiting on the outside of that small circle, waiting for the truth to finally break through. I tell you, the truth is a patient thing. It doesn't wash away in a shower, and it doesn't disappear in a grand jury room. It just waits. And sooner or later, the light always finds a shadow. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most unthinkable acts for a reason so absurd, so trivial, that they would defy the logic of any sane mind. You find yourself standing in the dark, looking at a life extinguished, and you realize that the world does not care about the truth unless you force it to. My. The case of Spencer Irwin is a testament to the sheer, blistering incompetence that can fester within a badge. A story of a young man discarded by the very system designed to protect him. I tell you, it makes my blood run cold to see how easily they write off a human life as just another statistic. Another body in a loading dock, another drug casualty. They assumed he was just another transient who took too much, stripped down in a fever dream of narcotics, and died in the dirt. You have to be kidding me. A 30-year-old man found naked and they did not even bother to conduct an autopsy. They took his blood for a screen to confirm the fantasy they had already constructed in their minds. Ignoring the reality staring them in the face, they did not collect his clothes. They did not secure the scene. They did not look for the truth because the truth was inconvenient. Spencer Irwin was not a stereotype. He was a son, a man who struggled with his own demons, yet reached out to others lost in shadows, offering them the very hope he fought to maintain for himself. He was a man with a mother, Kelly, who possessed more investigative grit than a room full of complacent detectives. When the authorities told her the case was closed, that it was natural causes, she did not retreat. She stood her ground while the system tried to gaslight her, tried to tell her that her son had simply ceased to be. They spoke of cardiac events and the habits of a man in recovery, yet they could not explain why he was found in a place he had no reason to be, or why he was undressed in the California heat. It was not natural, and it was not a simple overdose. It was a failure of duty. The investigation, if you can call it that, was a tragedy of errors. When a mother has to piece together her own son's final movements, when she has to identify suspects like the individual named Angel who occupied her son's apartment after he was gone, you know the foundation of justice has crumbled. There was a car, a white vehicle captured on grainy footage, moving in the dark, and yet the initial response was silence. They wanted her to stop looking, to stay safe, to just accept the narrative of a man who died from his own lifestyle. That is not police work. That is an insult to every person who has ever sworn an oath. When you look at the crime scene photos, those symmetrical marks in the dirt, the line across his neck that screams of something other than a fall, you realize that the lack of an autopsy was the ultimate sin. They destroyed the evidence of his death, and in doing so, they left a mother in a state of eternal questioning. Spencer was a man of value. A witness saw him that morning and knew immediately that something was wrong, that he did not belong to the streets, that he was a victim of something foul. But the officers on the scene were already looking for an exit, already preparing to return to the comfort of their apathy. It is a haunting thing to know that his last act was to try to improve his life, to prepare for rehab, to fix his connection to the world, only to be cut down by forces that remain shrouded in shadow. The laptop, the missing phone, the strange messages, the connections to those he tried to help, these are not the threads of a natural death. They are the frayed edges of a story that someone is trying to keep quiet. I look at Kelly Irwin, and I see a force of nature. She fought, she reached out, and she refused to let her son be defined by the lazy conclusions of men who did not care enough to check the facts. She found a witness who cared. She consulted a forensic pathologist who confirmed the red flags that the coroner chose to ignore. She kept his memory alive, even when the ones in charge tried to bury it along with his body. It is a dark, cold realization that in this life, you might have to fight for your own dignity, even after you are gone. We owe it to the victims, we owe it to the truth, and we owe it to the mothers who will never stop asking why. I have seen many things in my years behind a desk and out in the field, but the sheer, reckless dismissal of a life is something that never ceases to turn my stomach. Justice is not a gift. It is a battle, and in the case of Spencer Irwin, the battle is far from over. My, people are strange creatures. They walk through this world believing they can bury their secrets as easily as they bury their trash. But they forget one thing. The truth has a funny way of crawling back to the surface. It is a persistent thing. It does not sleep, and it certainly does not stay quiet forever. I have seen it 1,000 times in my career. You have individuals who think they are clever, concocting elaborate fairy tales to mask their cowardice, while a family is left in the freezing dark, waiting for a son who is never coming home. You have to be kidding me. You think you can just vanish into thin air, leaving your life behind, and no one will notice? Someone always notices. The silence of the missing is deafening. This is the story of Christopher Cole Thomas, a young man who had the world at his feet, a bright, driven kid. He was a salutatorian of his high school, a kid who wanted to get into medicine because he understood what it meant to care for someone else. But at 22, he was trying to find his way, feeling the weight of the world, just looking for a bit of experience. He trusted the wrong people. He jumped into a vehicle with two men, Julian Vias Jr. and Jeremy Carpenter, thinking he was just tagging along for a bit of work and a road trip. But the road they were on did not lead to Minnesota. It led to a place where morality goes to die. They claimed they were traveling, but that is a bold-faced lie. They were chasing a fix. They drove all the way to North Carolina to buy methamphetamine. And when you dance with the devil, do not be surprised when he tries to lead. Something went wrong that night in November of 2016. The stories they told the police in the small town of Benson were shifting, contradictory, and frankly, insulting to anyone with a badge and a brain. They said Cole panicked, grabbed the keys, and ran off into the night. They said he was having mental health issues. I have heard it all. When a story changes every time you turn around, it is not a lapse in memory. It is a lie. I tell you, the cowardice on display here is staggering. These men, Julian and Jeremy, they reported him missing, yet they did not have the common decency to call his parents. They just went back to their lives, leaving a young man to face whatever nightmare they had triggered. Cole's father, Chris, had to do the detective work himself, finding connections on social media, pulling the strings that the so-called authorities had missed in those early, crucial hours. And what he found was enough to turn your blood to ice. He found out his son was not just running away. He was running for his life. The police work here, spearheaded by Captain Greg Percy, was meticulous. It took weeks of poring over surveillance footage until he found those 30 seconds at 1:10 in the morning. A grainy image of Cole walking down the street, and right behind him, Jeremy. No panique, no running. Just a slow, calculated walk. The mask was slipping. Every time they were confronted with the cold, hard data, the cell phone pings, the location logs, their stories evolved like a shapeshifter. First, they were alone. Then they were at a church. Then they heard gunshots. It is pathetic. They had Cole's phone the entire time, carrying it with them like a guilty souvenir. Likely try to crack it, trying to erase the trail of their own incompetence and malice. The theory that emerges from this mess is as dark as it gets. You have people like Rudolfo De Leon Jr. and Anthony James Jr., players in a drug world where human life is worth less than a bag of crystals. Maybe it was a double cross. Maybe the drugs were tossed, or maybe they were stolen. Whatever the spark, the fire consumed a young man who was simply in over his head. You can see the desperation in the way the suspects move, the way they try to control the narrative. But the digital trail does not lie. It places them all in a web of movement that defies their innocent explanations. I look at the parents, Chris and Kathy, and my heart breaks. They spent months in a trailer, searching fields and ditches, turning over every stone. They even went so far as to bond one of the suspects, Anthony James Jr., out of jail just to get him away from the others, hoping he would tell the truth. They played a game of psychological chess with a man who had already shown he was willing to let a boy vanish. They got fragments. They got hints. They got the cold, hard realization that the people who knew what happened were terrified of their own shadows. In the end, the charges were dropped, not because they were innocent, but because the machinery of justice sometimes needs a better foundation than just suspicion. Jeremy Carpenter is gone now, taking his answers to the grave, but the others remain. They're walking around, breathing air, living lives, while a family is left with an empty chair and a lifetime of questions. It is a tragedy of the highest order. A young man with a future was extinguished because he got caught in the crossfire of people who viewed him as a pawn. It is not just a disappearance. It is a stain on humanity. I have spent my life looking at the worst of us, and I can tell you, the truth is always there. It is waiting in the data, in the silences, in the gaps between the lies. Someone knows where Cole is, and as long as they keep that secret, they are carrying a weight that will eventually pull them under. My, you can run, you can hide, you can lie until you are blue in the face, but the truth, it always catches up. My. You see, the thing about human beings is that they're fragile creatures, and sometimes they break in the most spectacular and terrifying ways. You sit there, you look at the evidence, and you try to piece together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing, and the other half seem to belong to a completely different box. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of people who thought they could hide the truth, but this case, the Jameson family, it has a cold, biting reality to it that stays with you long after the lights go out. You want to talk about monsters? Well, you have to look past the shadows, past the talk of demons and witchcraft, because those are just stories we tell ourselves to avoid looking at the jagged reality of what one person can do to another. Let us look at the facts. You have Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson, a couple trying to escape their own demons, searching for a fresh start on a rugged stretch of land in Latimer County, Oklahoma. They had their plans, they had their dreams, and they had a significant amount of cash, roughly $32,000, tucked away under the seat of their truck. Does that sound like a family intending to commit suicide? I tell you, it does not. A person who plans to leave this world does not usually worry about property taxes or the logistics of homeschooling their 6-year-old daughter. Madison, they were planning for a future. Yet they drove into those mountains on that 8th day of October in 2009, and they simply vanished. When the truck was discovered, it was locked with the keys still in the ignition, and that poor little dog trapped inside, starving and on the verge of death. You have to be kidding me. If someone is planning to take their own life, why leave a child and a dog behind to suffer such a cruel fate? No, that does not hold water. The 7-page letter Sherilyn wrote to Bobby, filled with accusations and talk of toxic spirits, is often painted as a suicide note, but I see it differently. It is a cry of a woman who is unraveling, someone trapped in a cycle of pain, addiction, and mental illness, living in a house she felt was haunted by a suffocating, dark presence. The neighbors saw it, her friends saw it, and the tragedy is that they were all spiraling downward together. People want to talk about the surveillance footage, that grainy video of the family walking back and forth to their truck as if they were in a trance. Was it drugs? Was it a psychological break? Or was it just a family trying to load a vehicle while overwhelmed by the weight of their own lives? The truth is, that video has been dissected, sensationalized, and turned into a piece of folklore, but it tells us very little about what actually happened on that mountain. What it does tell us is that they were there, and shortly after, they were gone. When their remains were finally found years later, in 2013, just 2.6 miles from that abandoned truck, it settled a debate about whether they had just walked away to start a new life. They did not. They were in the wilderness, and they were dead. The fact that their skulls were found in such a remote area, in a place that would be an arduous, punishing hike even for a person in perfect health, completely destroys the idea of a simple murder-suicide or a tragic accident. You do not just stumble into that terrain, and you certainly do not end up there by happenstance. This was foul play. Someone, or perhaps a group of someone's, made sure they did not come back down that mountain. I look at the individuals involved, and my mind keeps drifting back to the people who knew they were coming, the people who knew about the money. Sheriff Beecham always had followed the money, and that is exactly where the trail goes cold. You have the property owners, you have the locals living off the grid, and you have a web of stories that shift every time you try to pin them down. Dan Clemens, a man with a history of violence under a different name, claimed to have spoken with them, gave them directions, and then just happened to be the one who didn't call the police immediately when the truck was finally spotted. It is suspicious, it is messy, and it is the kind of thing that makes my blood boil. The system failed them. Because the cause of death could not be determined, the investigation stalled, and the case was relegated to a missing persons file that no one is actively working. That is a failure of justice. A family is dead, a little girl is dead, and the people responsible are likely still walking free, perhaps even living on that same mountain. It is a haunting thought, is it not? That in this world you can be erased, and the people who swore to find the truth just move on to the next desk, the next call, the next tragedy. I have seen enough death to know that evil does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it just wears the face of a neighbor who knows more than they are willing to say. The Jameson family was looking for a sanctuary, a place to be free from the noise of the world. And instead, they found a grave. My heart aches for that little girl, Madison, who had no choice in the darkness her parents brought her into, and no chance to escape the fate that met them on that mountain. Justice is not just a word. It is a promise we make to the victims. And right now, that promise is broken. If you know something, if you have a shred of evidence, you have an obligation to bring it forward, because silence is just another way of letting the wrong people win. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit atrocities for the most trivial reasons imaginable, driven by impulses that would make a sane person shudder. I tell you, you have to be kidding me if you think there is any logic in the darkness of a man like David Meyerhofer. My, looking at this case is like staring into a bottomless pit of cold. Calculated malice disguised as the life of a local carpenter. You have a quiet, serene Montana landscape in the summer of 1973. And then you have a monster slicing through the nylon fabric of a 12-year-old girl's tent, snatching a child from the very sanctuary of her family. Marietta Yeager, a mother forced into a nightmare that no parent should ever endure, becomes the tip of the spear in this investigation. She is not a professional, but she possesses an unrelenting determination, a fire that burns brighter than the pathetic lies of a coward. She is the hero here, not the man with the badge, and certainly not the predator playing games with her grief. When I analyze the psychology of a man like Meyerhofer, I see a classic, pathetic narcissist. He was a man who craved power because in his real life, he possessed none. He was a local oddball, a man who inserted himself into the investigation for the veteran detectives who had poured years of their lives into the case. The outcome brought a profound sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the true measure of justice is often complex. They hoped that by bringing the truth to light, they had provided some small measure of peace to the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, two gentle souls whose journey to find the American dream would always be remembered by the community they loved. In the heart of Texas, where the summers stretched long and golden across the prairie, the city of Arlington grew as a patchwork of dreams. Among the many who came to weave their own threads into this vast tapestry were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had left the quiet riverways and emerald fields of Vietnam in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than their hopes, their family, and an unwavering belief in the promise of a new land. To know Long was to know a man of quiet dignity. Even in his 70s, his hands remained steady, shaped by decades of honest labor. He possessed a gentle smile that could warm the coldest room, and his eyes held the wisdom of a survivor who had seen the world shift and change. Hong was his perfect counterpart. She was a woman of infinite grace, whose laughter was like the chime of wind bells on a breezy afternoon. Together, they represented the very essence of devotion, having walked hand in hand through the trials of immigration and the challenges of starting over in a foreign country. When they arrived in Texas, they did not seek an easy path. Instead, they established a commercial sewing business, a venture born from their shared skill and tireless work ethic. In the beginning, the hum of the sewing machines was a heartbeat of their household. They worked side by side, measuring fabrics, cutting patterns, and sewing garments with meticulous care. To help them navigate this new landscape, they enlisted their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was 38 years old, energetic, and spoke the best English in the family. He became the face of the business, interacting with contractors and managing the daily operations, while Long and Hong focused on the craftsmanship that defined their work. For nearly a decade, their dedication bore beautiful fruit. The sewing business flourished, and their household was filled with the happy noise of children and grandchildren. Their crowning achievement came when they secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, none other than Disney. It was a proud moment for family, a validation of every sacrifice they had made. They felt they had truly captured their slice of the American dream. But as the years passed, the tides of fortune began to turn. By the year 2011, the sewing business encountered severe challenges. The vital contract with Disney was lost, and the steady stream of orders dwindled to a trickle. The gentle hum of the machines grew quiet, replaced by the heavy silence of financial worry. Long and Hong, deeply traditional in their ways, felt the weight of this decline. They had spent their lives protecting their family, and the prospect of failure was a shadow they could not easily shake. In their search for comfort and a way to restore their family's prosperity, they turned to the ancient beliefs of their homeland. For thousands of years, their ancestors had believed in spiritual forces, in the balance of energy, and in the protection of benevolent guardians. When a family faced overwhelming obstacles, it was customary to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to lift curses and invite good fortune back into home. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow Tran began searching for someone who could help them heal their business and their hearts. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, some 250 miles away. The woman, named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift heavy curses and bring positive energy to those in need. Desperate for a solution, Chow contacted her and arranged a consultation at her home in Houston. It was a journey made of hope, a search for a guiding light in a season of darkness. But none of them could have foreseen that this quest for a spiritual savior would slowly lead them into a web of greed and tragedy. Chapter 2: The Gathering Shadow. The journey to Houston was filled with quiet anticipation. Chow Tran drove down the long highway, his mind occupied by the survival of the family business. Beside him, the memory of his mother-in-law's hopeful words offered comfort. When he met Daphne Wright, he found a woman of striking presence. She was 44 years old, confident, and carried herself with an authority that suggested deep knowledge of the spiritual realm. She spoke with certainty, assuring Chow that she could easily identify the source of their bad luck and dissolve it through ancient rituals. Daphne performed her ceremonies, burning incense and reciting prayers meant to realign the family's fortunes. For a brief moment, Chow felt a sense of relief. He returned to Arlington with renewed hope, sharing the details of the meeting with Long and Hong. The family wanted so desperately to believe that their troubles were temporary, that the dark cloud over their sewing shop would soon dissipate. Yet, as the months of 2011 rolled into 212, the business did not recover. Instead, the financial burden grew heavier. Rather than questioning the effectiveness of the rituals, Chow found himself drawn deeper into Daphne's influence. He believed that perhaps the curse was stronger than they had initially realized, requiring more intensive and far more expensive spiritual interventions. Daphne, recognizing the family's desperation, began to offer her services on credit. The cost of the ceremonies, the protective charms, and the rituals began to accumulate rapidly. What started as small offerings soon ballooned into an astronomical debt. Over the course of a single year, the amount the family allegedly owed Daphne grew to somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. It was a staggering sum, one that the struggling sewing business could never hope to repay. As the debt mounted, the atmosphere within the family changed. The light-hearted laughter that once filled Long and Hong's apartment was replaced by whispered conversations and anxious glances. The elderly couple, who had always lived simply and honestly, felt trapped in a situation they did not fully understand. They had placed their trust in a spiritual guide, only to find themselves drowning in a financial abyss. Daphne's demeanor also shifted. The warm, comforting spiritual advisor began to reveal a cold and demanding nature. She wanted her money, and she was not a person who tolerated delay. She knew that Long and Hong possessed substantial life insurance policies, designed to secure the future of their children and grandchildren in the event of their passing. This knowledge sparked a dark and terrible ambition within her. If the family could not pay their debt in life, she would find a way to collect it through their deaths. Unbeknownst to the gentle elderly couple, a plan was being formed in the dark. Daphne reached out to an acquaintance named Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man who was struggling to survive after being laid off from his job. Desperate, hungry, and facing the prospect of homelessness, Bobby was highly vulnerable to temptation. Daphne offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and commit an unspeakable act. To assist him, Bobby enlisted a 16-year-old nephew, Willie Guillory, a young man who felt he had no choice but to follow his uncle's lead. Chapter 3. The Fateful Morning. The morning of June 10th, 2012, began like any other Sunday in Arlington. The air was warm and still, the sun rising slowly over the quiet apartment complexes. But at 7:29 in the morning, the peace of the day was shattered when emergency dispatchers received a call from Chow Tran. His voice was laced with worry as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. Chow explained to the dispatcher that his teenage son had gone to the apartment to knock on the door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside, growing increasingly anxious when they noticed that one of the windows was slightly open and things inside did not appear right. Too terrified to enter the residence themselves, they waited on the sidewalk, praying that their fears were groundless. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, he noticed a large group of family members standing outside. It was unusually early for a welfare check, and the palpable anxiety of the crowd immediately signaled to him that this was no routine call. Entering the apartment through the unlocked door, Officer Weller was immediately struck by the state of the home. The living room was in complete disarray, presenting all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was overturned. He called out into the quiet rooms, his voice echoing off the walls, but there was no response. He systematically searched the kitchen, the bathroom, and finally entered the bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. Officer Weller felt a momentary sense of relief, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to escape the summer heat. He turned to leave the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the walls. That was when he saw them. Near a small closet, there were faint hand smudges on the wall, as if someone had reached out for support in a moment of struggle. A chill ran down the officer's spine. Every instinct told him that opening that closet door would change everything, yet his duty compelled him forward. With a hesitant hand, he pulled open the closet door. The sight that met him was one of profound tragedy. Long and Hong were inside, their lives cruelly stolen from them. They had been bound with duct tape, their faces covered to prevent them from calling for help. It was a scene of immense violence, one that left even a veteran officer like Weller in a state of shock. He walked out of the bedroom, temporarily unable to speak or use his radio, paralyzed by the sheer weight of what he had witnessed. Once he regained his composure, he called for assistance, summoning a supervisor and the homicide unit. The peaceful Sunday had transformed into a search for answers, a quest to discover who could commit such a heartless act against two gentle elders who had never harmed a soul. Chapter 4. The Pursuit of Truth. The arrival of the Arlington homicide investigators brought a focused, determined energy to the scene. Detective Stewart, a seasoned investigator with 21 years in the department, took charge of the case. He stood in the apartment, surveying the chaos, his mind analyzing every detail. The physical evidence left behind was highly unusual. On the coffee table, a plate of crushed prescription pills lay undisturbed, alongside a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped neatly around a beer bottle, left in a prominent position. To the untrained eye, these items pointed directly to local gang activity. Arlington was home to several active gangs known for extortion and robbery, and the blue bandana was a color often associated with their members. However, Detective Stewart remained deeply skeptical. The crime scene felt too staged, the clues too conveniently displayed. Most gang robberies were quick and chaotic, rarely involving such a high level of personal, targeted violence. The extensive use of duct tape and the deliberate concealment of the bodies in the closet suggested an intention that went far beyond a simple burglary gone wrong. It felt personal. The investigators began the delicate process of interviewing the grieving family. Chow Tran, as a primary English speaker, became their main point of contact. He described the previous evening, explaining that the family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday. It had been a happy occasion, filled with laughter and love. The elderly couple had stayed until 10:30 in the evening, after which they were driven home by another family member. It was the last time they were seen alive. Chow painted a picture of a sweet, generous couple who had no enemies and lived quiet lives. He mentioned that while Vietnamese immigrants often kept cash at home due to a traditional distrust of banking institutions, his in-laws had very little money. The sewing business had been struggling, and they were facing difficult times. As the detectives continued their work, a phone call from an insurance company changed the trajectory of the investigation. The agent informed Detective Stewart that Long and Hong were covered by life insurance policies, totaling $1 million. When the detective asked who the beneficiaries were, the answer was clear. Chow Tran was among them. This revelation introduced a complex financial motive. On June 13, 2012, the detectives invited Chow to the police station for a follow-up interview. Chow was cooperative, explaining that the insurance policies were established to ensure the survival of the family, business in the event of a tragedy. He provided a detailed timeline of his whereabouts on the night of the murders, explaining that he and other family members had played cards until after 10 o'clock. His alibi was insistent, and without direct evidence, the police could not name him as a suspect. Meanwhile, the forensic laboratory processed the evidence from the apartment. They gathered deoxyribonucleic acid profiles from the marijuana cigarette and examined the duct tape for fingerprints. When the results returned, the investigators faced a major setback. The deoxyribonucleic acid did not match Chow, any family member, or any profile within a combined DNA index system database. With no immediate matches and no new leads, the momentum of the investigation began to slow. The detectives had interviewed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and community members, but the killer remained in the shadows. Months turned into years, and the case of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu slowly went cold. Yet, the memory of the gentle couple remained a quiet flame, keeping the promise of justice alive in the hearts of the detectives. Chapter 5, The Catalyst. For 3 long years, the file containing the details of the Arlington tragedy sat on a shelf, quiet but never forgotten. The year was now 2015, and the world had moved on. But in the grand design of justice, the smallest events can sometimes set the largest wheels in motion. In the city of Houston, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse. In the state of Texas, horse theft is a serious felony. Because Willie had reached the age of adulthood and was now being charged with a felony, the law required his biological profile to be entered into the national database. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old with no prior felony convictions, which was why his profile had never appeared in the system. When his deoxyribonucleic acid was uploaded, the digital systems of the law performed a silent comparison. Within seconds, a match was found. The deoxyribonucleic acid on the partially smoked marijuana cigarette recovered from the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, Arlington detectives traveled to locate Willie. They arrested him for a parole violation to avoid alerting him to the true nature of their interest. In the interrogation room, Willie initially denied any involvement, claiming he had never been anywhere near Arlington. But when Detective Stewart laid out the scientific reality of the biological evidence, the young man's defenses crumbled. He began to weep, the heavy burden of a secret finally breaking his resolve. He confessed to being in the apartment, but he insisted he had not acted alone. He pointed the finger at his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie recounted the events of June 9, 2012. His uncle had approached him, asking for help with a job in Arlington. Having grown up in a difficult environment, Willie felt he had no choice but to accompany his uncle. When they arrived, Bobby used a physical key to enter the apartment, intending to stage a robbery before the couple returned. They scattered belongings, left the pills, the beer bottle, and the blue bandana to make it look like the work of local gang members. Willie admitted to smoking the marijuana cigarette, unaware that this small act would eventually lead the police to their door. When Long and Hong returned home, the situation quickly escalated into violence. Bobby attacked the elderly man, while Willie attempted to prevent Hong from escaping. After the struggle ended, they used duct tape to secure the couple and move them into the closet before fleeing back to Houston. When asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed the name of the person who had orchestrated the entire plot, Daphne Wright. He explained that Daphne was a friend of his uncle's and had claimed that the couple owed her a substantial amount of money. She had told Bobby that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead, promising him $10,000 for the deed. With this explosive confession, the puzzle began to fall into place. The detectives now knew that the tragedy was not a random act of street violence, but a calculated, cold-hearted plan born of greed and manipulation. Chapter 6, Unveiling the Mastermind. The focus of the investigation now turned to Bobby Guillory. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, where they arrested the 52-year-old man on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially, Bobby remained silent, refusing to cooperate. But when faced with a search warrant for his own biological profile and the realization that his nephew had already confessed, his resolve dissolved. He broke down, weeping in the interrogation room, expressing fear and regret for his actions. He had no prior criminal history and had never been in trouble with the law before this tragic event. Bobby confirmed Willie's story, placing the blame entirely on Daphne Wright. He explained that he had been in a state of extreme financial desperation, having lost his job and facing the threat of life on the streets. Daphne had recognized his vulnerability and used it to her advantage, offering him $10,000 to carry out the crime. According to Bobby, Daphne operated as a spiritual loan shark. Chow Tran and Hong Lu had become deeply indebted to her as they tried to save their failing business. When they could no longer pay, Daphne realized she could collect her money through the life insurance policies. Bobby made a startling revelation during his confession. He claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. This accusation of ultimate betrayal shocked the investigators. Chow, whom they had supported and interviewed multiple times, was now implicated as a key participant in the conspiracy. On August 31, 2016, detectives traveled to Houston to confront Daphne Wright. They found a woman who was the undisputed leader of her household, married with 3 daughters. When questioned about Chow, she confirmed he was a client, but refused to discuss their financial arrangements. Her attitude was cold and dismissive, showing no remorse or willingness to assist the police. Armed with an arrest warrant, the detectives returned to her home, placing her under arrest and conducting a thorough search of the residence. Inside, they discovered detailed ledgers that documented her business transactions. The books revealed that she regularly charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services, removing any doubt about the massive financial scale of her operations. Daphne's husband, Howard, was fully cooperative with the police, maintaining that he had no knowledge of his wife's dark activities. He expressed genuine shock, having believed his wife was simply offering peaceful spiritual guidance to those in need. Daphne, however, refused to speak, demanding the presence of her attorney and maintaining a stoic silence. Chapter 7. The Scales of Justice. The final piece of the complex narrative emerged when prosecutors subpoenaed Chow Tran's financial records in 2015. They discovered that following the tragic deaths of his in-laws, Chow had not reopened the sewing business. Instead, he had purchased a comfortable new home with the proceeds of the life insurance policies. Faced with the mounting evidence against him, Chow refused to speak to the police without his attorney, recognizing that they needed his testimony to secure a conviction against the mastermind. Daphne Wright, the prosecutors made a difficult decision. They offered Chow immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full cooperation and truthful testimony at trial. It was a compromise often required in the pursuit of justice, a choice to hold the primary instigator accountable. During his deposition, Chow presented a narrative of psychological control. He claimed that he and his mother-in-law had been utterly terrified of Daphne's alleged spiritual powers, believing she could place a devastating curse on their family if they did not pay. He even claimed that Hong Lu, in an act of ultimate self-sacrifice, had suggested her own death so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy the debt. Investigators found this claim to be highly unbelievable, viewing it as an attempt to lessen his own guilt. Daphne's trial began on August 26, 2019. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a relentless, greedy woman who manipulated his family and demanded their lives for money. The defense countered by pointing out that there was no physical documentation of the vast debt and suggested that Chow had orchestrated the crime entirely for his own financial gain, pocketing the $850,000 of insurance money. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury listened closely to the accumulation of evidence, including the confessions of Bobby and Willie and the physical ledgers found in Daphne's home. In September of 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and received the ultimate penalty of life in prison, without the possibility of parole, while Bobby and Willie also faced the consequences of their actions. The resolution of the case left a lingering sense of incompletion for the detectives. Chow Tran remained free, shielded by his immunity agreement. Yet, as the community looked back on the lives of Long Nguyen and Hong Le, they chose to remember the warmth, the dedication, and the beautiful dreams they had brought from Vietnam. The story of their journey was a reminder of the strength of love, the dangers of blind trust, and the enduring pursuit of truth that eventually brought the shadows into the light. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, usually brings with it a warm, golden promise, the kind of light that stretches across the wide concrete avenues and bathes the suburban neighborhoods in a quiet, domestic peace. In the early years of the new millennium, this corner of Tarrant County had become a sanctuary for families seeking a fresh start, a place where different cultures woven together created a vibrant, colorful tapestry of shared hopes. Among those who had traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean to build a new life were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Le. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, bringing with them not only their 3 children, but also a deep treasury of time-honored traditions, an unwavering work ethic, and a love that had weathered decades of change. Long was a man of quiet dignity, whose face bore the gentle lines of a lifetime of hard work and laughter, while Hong was the warm, beating heart of their household. A woman whose culinary skills and nurturing presence made their home a central gathering place for the local Vietnamese community. Together, they represented the resilient spirit of the post-1975 immigrant generation, those who had left behind the familiar landscapes of their homeland to cultivate a legacy for their children and grandchildren in a land of unfamiliar customs and languages. For more than a decade, they poured their energy into building a commercial sewing business, a venture that began as a modest operation in their garage, but quickly grew into a thriving enterprise. To navigate the complexities of American business transactions, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who possessed a strong command of the English language. Chow was the public face of the business, the one who negotiated contracts, shook hands with suppliers, and acted as the bridge between the traditional world of his in-laws and the fast-paced commercial environment of Texas. By the late 90s and early 2000s, the family reached the pinnacle of their entrepreneurial journey when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, a commercial giant whose name was recognized by children and families across the world. For a time, it seemed that their version of the American dream had been fully realized. Their home was filled with the sounds of their grandchildren playing, the hum of sewing machines, and the comforting aroma of traditional Vietnamese broth simmering on the stove. Yet, as is often the case with the unpredictable tides of commerce, this period of abundance was not to last. By the year 2011, the sewing business suffered a devastating blow when the massive contract was discontinued. Almost overnight, the steady flow of orders dwindled to a trickle, and the family found themselves facing severe financial distress. The machines that had once hummed with productive energy fell silent, and a heavy cloud of anxiety settled over the household. Long and Hong, deeply rooted in the traditional spiritual practices of their ancestors, believed that the sudden string of misfortune was not merely a consequence of shifting market dynamics, but rather the result of a spiritual imbalance, a curse that had settled upon their endeavors. In many East Asian traditions, when a family encounters a series of insurmountable obstacles, such as impending bankruptcy, severe health crises, or marital discord, it is common to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These advisors are believed to possess the unique ability to communicate with the spiritual realm, perform cleansing rituals, and invite the protective blessings of the lucky deities and the gods of wealth, desperate to find a solution and restore harmony to their family. Hong and Chow began searching through the local Vietnamese language newspapers, hoping to find someone who could help them lift the perceived curse. Their search led them to an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles to the south. The woman, who went by the name of Daphne Wright, advertised a wide range of metaphysical services, claiming she could remove malevolent curses, bestow powerful blessings of good fortune, and help struggling businesses regain their prosperity. For a family standing on the precipice of financial ruin, Daphne's promises shone like a beacon of hope. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow made the drive to Houston to consult with the spiritual practitioner, embarking on a path that would ultimately lead the family into a dark web of manipulation and greed. At first, the rituals seemed to offer a sense of comfort. Daphne performed ceremonies intended to cleanse a family's business of negative energy, and for a brief period, Long and Hong felt a renewed sense of optimism. They believed that their spiritual savior would guide them back to the prosperous path they had worked so hard to establish. However, as the months passed, the promised financial recovery failed to materialize. Instead of advising the family to adjust their business strategies, Daphne maintained that the curse was exceptionally stubborn, requiring increasingly elaborate and expensive rituals to dismantle. Deeply ensnared by their beliefs and terrified of the spiritual consequences of stopping the Ceremonies. The family continued to pour their remaining resources into Daphne's services. Because they did not have the cash readily available, Daphne began extending them credit, allowing the debt to accumulate. Over the course of a year, the financial obligation ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. What had begun as a quest for spiritual healing had transformed into a crushing financial prison, with Daphne acting as a spiritual loan shark who demanded absolute compliance and prompt payment. The tension reached a devastating climax on the morning of June 10th, 2012. At 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers in Arlington received a frantic call from Chow Tran. He explained that he and his family had been trying to contact his elderly in-laws, 70-something Long Nguyen and Hong Lee, but had received no response. Worried by the silence, Chow had sent his teenage son to knock on the apartment door, but the knock went unanswered. The family gathered outside the residence, their concern deepening when they noticed that one of the apartment windows was unusually open. Sensing that something was terribly wrong, but too frightened to enter the home themselves, they waited anxiously on the sidewalk for police to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington police force, was the first to respond to the welfare check. As she pulled up to the apartment complex, she immediately sensed that this was not a routine call. It was exceptionally early in the morning for a welfare check, and the sight of an entire multi-generational family standing outside in a state of visible distress suggested a situation of gravity. Officer Weller entered the apartment, calling out the names of the elderly couple, but her voice echoed through quiet rooms without response. The interior of the home was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers had been pulled open, personal belongings were scattered across the floor, and a collection of compact discs had been ransacked. As Officer Weller searched the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, she found no sign of the occupants. She proceeded to the master bedroom, shining her flashlight into the darkened corners. Initially, she saw nothing out of the ordinary that would suggest the couple was still inside, and she began to hope that perhaps they had simply gone for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool air before the Texas heat set in. However, as she turned to leave the bedroom, her flashlight caught a series of faint hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a remarkably small closet. A sudden, instinctual hesitation washed over her, an internal voice warning her the tragedy that lay beyond the thin wooden door. Recognizing her duty to leave no stone unturned, she reached out and pulled the closet door open. Inside the cramped space lay the bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. They had been bound hand and foot, hogtied with heavy silver duct tape. Their heads and mouths were completely enveloped in layers of the thick adhesive, and the small closet was stained with the unmistakable signs of a violent struggle. Officer Weller, despite her 14 years of experience on the force, was struck with a profound sense of shock. The sheer brutality of the scene left her momentarily unable to speak or even use her radio to call. For assistance, she stepped back into the living room, gathering her composure in the quiet space, before finally contacting her supervisor and requesting the dispatch of the crime scene unit and the homicide investigators. When Detective Stewart and the veteran homicide team arrived, they were met with a crime scene that was both heartbreaking and perplexing. The physical evidence suggested that the elderly couple had been confronted the moment they stepped through their front door. There were traces of blood on the entryway carpet, on the couch, on the coffee table, and along the walls leading toward the back bedroom, indicating that they had desperately tried to cling to the walls as they were being forced into the rear of the apartment. On the coffee table, investigators found a plate containing crushed prescription pills, prepared in a manner that suggested recreational consumption, alongside a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle, left in a prominent position as if it were a deliberate calling card. To the initial observer, these items strongly pointed to the involvement of local street gangs. some of whom were known to operate in the region and occasionally extort local business owners. Yet, as the seasoned investigators began to analyze the scene, a sense of skepticism began to take root. The presentation of the gang markers seemed almost too perfect, too stage-managed to be the work of impulsive street criminals. While street gangs certainly engage in robberies, the extreme level of personalized violence inflicted upon an elderly couple who had no known enemies or illicit association seemed inconsistent with a simple robbery gone wrong. The detectives began to hypothesize that the crime scene had been deliberately staged to mislead the police and divert attention away from the true perpetrators. The following day, detectives attended the autopsies of the victims at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical examiner confirmed that both Long and Hong had suffered significant blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted with an instrument resembling a hammer or a small bat. However, the physical trauma was not the primary cause of their deaths. The autopsy revealed a far more agonizing reality. Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, and Long's face had been bound with 10 feet of the same material. They had died of suffocation. The revelation of this slow, painful end deepened the determination of the detectives to bring those responsible to justice. As the team returned to the police station to coordinate their next steps, Detective Stewart received an unexpected telephone call from a life insurance company. The representative informed the detective that the deceased couple was covered under a highly substantial life insurance policy valued at approximately $1 million. When Detective Stewart inquired about the designated beneficiaries of this policy, the answer sent the investigation in an entirely new direction. One of the primary beneficiaries was their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Hoping to clarify this financial development, investigators invited Chow to the police station for a follow-up interview on June 13th, 2012. Chow cooperated fully, presenting himself as a grieving relative eager to assist the police. When questioned about the insurance policy, he explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the family had established a policy to ensure the business could continue to support the extended family in the event of tragedy. He also provided a detailed, consistent timeline of his activities on the night of the murders, explaining that the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday, playing cards and sharing a meal until past 10 o'clock in the evening. Chow's alibi was supported by other family members, and the detectives found no immediate physical evidence to connect him to the physical acts of violence. To ensure a thorough investigation, the crime scene technicians processed the biological evidence collected from the apartment, including the forensic profiles from the marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. The resulting deoxyribonucleic acid profile was submitted to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Combined DNA Index System, but the search yielded no matches. Because the database primarily contains profiles of individuals with prior felony convictions, the lack of a match suggested that the person who left the cigarette might have been a minor or someone who had never been arrested for a serious offense. With no viable leads, no matching fingerprints, and an entire family possessing consistent alibis, the investigation slowly ground to a halt. For more than 2 years, the file sat on detectives' desks, a somber reminder of an unsolved tragedy. The breakthrough came unexpectedly in October the year 2015, more than 3 years after the fateful night in Arlington. The police department received notification that a newly entered deoxyribonucleic acid profile in the national database had produced a perfect match to the biological material recovered from the marijuana cigarette. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had not been present in the database during the initial investigation. Now an adult with a felony record, his identity was finally revealed to the law enforcement community. On October 17, 2015, investigators located Willie Guillory and brought him in for questioning. Initially, Willie denied any knowledge of the events in Arlington, claiming he had never visited the city and suggesting that perhaps his biological material had been somehow transferred without his knowledge. However, when the detectives presented him with the undeniable scientific accuracy of the deoxyribonucleic acid match, the young man's defenses crumbled. He broke down in tears and confessed to his role in the crime, insisting that he had not acted alone. Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he had been living under the care of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had instructed him to join him on a trip to Arlington to assist with a task, promising that they would be compensated for their help. On June 9, 2012, the uncle and nephew made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington. Willie claimed that Bobby had been provided with a key to the elderly couple's apartment, allowing them to enter the residence without forcing the lock. Once inside, Bobby instructed Willie to scatter items around the living room, open drawers, and leave the gang-related items, including the blue bandana, the crushed pills, and the beer bottle, to create the illusion of a street gang robbery. During this process, Willie had smoked a portion of a marijuana cigarette, inadvertently leaving behind the crucial piece of evidence that would eventually identify him. When Long and Hong returned home, the situation turned violent. Bobby confronted the couple, using a blunt object to incapacitate them, while Willie assisted in preventing their escape. Together, they bound the victims with duct tape, moved them into the small bedroom closet, and returned to Houston. When asked why they had targeted an elderly couple they did not even know, Willie revealed that the entire operation had been organized and funded by a prominent acquaintance of his uncle, a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright. Willie stated that he had witnessed his uncle meeting with Daphne in her office, where she complained about clients who owed her a substantial amount of money, and declared that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead. Armed with this critical confession, the investigators secured arrest warrants for Bobby Guillory. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, where they apprehended Bobby on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the reality of his arrest and the confession of his nephew, Bobby also chose to cooperate, confirming that Daphne Wright had orchestrated the entire plot. He explained that in 2011, he had been struggling with severe financial difficulties after being laid off from his job. Daphne, aware of his desperation, had offered him $10,000 to travel to Arlington and carry out the deed. Bobby painted a portrait of Daphne as an incredibly calculating individual who operated her spiritual practice with the ruthless efficiency of an organized enterprise. According to Bobby, Chow Tran and Hong Lee had accumulated a massive debt to Daphne for her services, and when they were unable to pay, Daphne proposed a solution centered on the couple's life insurance policies. She suggested that by removing the elderly couple, Chow and his wife would receive a significant financial windfall, which would then be used to settle the outstanding spiritual debt. Most shockingly, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. In August of the year 2016, detectives executed a search warrant at Daphne Wright's Houston residence and placed her under arrest inside her home. Investigators discovered detailed ledger books documenting her extensive business transactions. The records revealed that she had been charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for various spiritual services, confirming the immense financial scale of her operations. While Daphne maintained her innocence and refused to provide statements without her attorney, the combined testimonies of Willie and Bobby Guillory, along with the financial ledgers and the scientific evidence, provided a powerful foundation for the prosecution. To secure a conviction against the primary organizer of the crime, prosecutors made the difficult decision to offer Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his complete and honest testimony. Chow agreed to the arrangement, And during Daphne's trial in August of the year 2019, he took the stand to describe the immense psychological control she had exerted over his family. He portrayed her as an imposing, greedy figure who used their deeply held traditional beliefs to manipulate them, ultimately demanding their compliance under the threat of spiritual and physical ruin. The defense team vigorously challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he had used a spiritual advisor as a scapegoat to secure the life insurance proceeds for himself without facing legal consequences. However, after hearing all the evidence, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a definitive end to her manipulative reign. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the legal consequences of their actions, ensuring that those who had participated in the tragedy were held accountable. While the legal proceedings left some questions unanswered and brought a mixture of emotions to the surviving family members, the resolution of the case stands as a testament to the dedication of the investigators who refused to let the memory of Long, Nguyen, and Hong fade into obscurity. The story of their journey, their devotion to their family, and the ultimate triumph of justice serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring importance of community, truth, and the protective embrace of the law. The sun always seemed to rise with gentle, golden promise over flat, sprawling landscapes of north-central Texas. In the city of Arlington, a place where the hum of modern industry met the quiet warmth of tight-knit neighborhoods. The mornings were usually filled with the comforting sounds of early traffic, the chirping of birds in the oak trees, and the smell of fresh coffee brewing in suburban kitchens. It was a city of diverse faces, a tapestry of cultures woven together by families who had traveled from all corners of the world to find their own piece of the American dream. Among these families were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had arrived in the United States in the year 2000, leaving behind the familiar, bustling streets of their homeland in Vietnam. For decades, they had known the rhythm of a different life, one shaped by ancient traditions, close community ties, and the quiet resilience that comes from surviving times of great change. When they made the decision to pack up their lives and move to Texas with their 3 children, they were not looking for grand fortunes. Instead, they sought a peaceful sanctuary where their children and grandchildren could grow, learn, and thrive under the wide, open skies of a new land. In Arlington, they found a thriving Vietnamese community, a place where the old ways and the new world lived in a beautiful, harmonious balance. The first major wave of immigrants had arrived in the area after the year 1975, and over the decades, they had built a vibrant network of businesses, temples, and neighborhoods. Long and Hong studied the area carefully. They saw a place of opportunity, a welcoming city where hard work was rewarded and where they could establish a legacy. With determination and a shared work ethic, the elderly couple started a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, run out of a small workspace filled with the rhythmic hum of sewing machines, the colorful mounds of fabrics, and the soft chatter of family members working side by side. To help manage the business, they enlisted the support of their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was young, energetic, and spoke the best English in the family, making him the natural public face of the enterprise. He handled the contracts, spoke with the suppliers, and navigated the complex world of American business regulations, while Long and Hong focused on the craft they knew best, ensuring every garment was stitched with perfection. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore fruit. The business expanded, and their reputation for quality craftsmanship grew. The pinnacle of their success came when they secured a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, producing clothing that would bear the iconic designs of Disney. It was a proud moment for the family, a validation of all the sacrifices they had made when crossing the ocean. They were living the dream they had envisioned, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the respect of their peers. But life, like the Texas weather, can be unpredictable. By the year 2011, the economic tides began to turn. The coveted contract with the entertainment giant was lost, and almost overnight, the steady flow of orders dwindled to a trickle. The sewing machines grew quiet, and the heavy silence of financial anxiety settled over the family. The bills began to accumulate, and the pressure of maintaining the business started to take a heavy toll on everyone, especially on Hong and her son-in-law, Chow. In moments of deep distress, people often look to their roots for guidance and comfort. For generations, their ancestors have believed in the spiritual forces that govern luck, prosperity, and protection. In the traditional culture of their homeland, when a household faced a sudden string of bad luck or impending ruin, it was common to believe that a spiritual imbalance or even a curse was at play. To remedy this, families would seek the counsel of a spiritual advisor, a person believed to possess the rare ability to communicate with the unseen world, perform ancient rituals, and lift a heavy hand of misfortune. Anxious to save the family business and find a way out of the darkening financial shadow, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law began searching to the local Vietnamese newspapers, looking for someone who could offer a spiritual solution. It was there, among the advertisements of local merchants and community services, that they found a notice for a spiritual advisor located in Houston. Some 250 miles away, the woman advertised herself as a powerful healer, someone who could remove the most stubborn of bad curses, bestow good fortune, and restore peace to troubled households. With a heart full of hope, Chow reached out to the advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright. She agreed to meet him at her home in Houston for a consultation. The family believed that this meeting would be the turning point, the moment their luck would finally change and the sewing machines would hum with busy productivity. Once again, Daphne performed her rituals, burning incense and reciting prayers designed to ward off the negative energies that had plagued the business. For a brief period, Chow and Hong felt a sense of relief, confident that their spiritual savior would guide them back to prosperity. Yet, behind the facade of spiritual healing, a much darker reality was beginning to unfold. The rituals were not free, and Daphne Wright was not a simple, benevolent healer. As the months passed and the business failed to recover, Daphne began to charge exorbitant fees for her services. She ran her operations on a system of spiritual credit, convincing the desperate family that more complex, intensive rituals were required to fully break the curse. The debt grew rapidly, ballooning to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. The family was trapped in a cycle of desperation, pouring what little money they had left into the rituals. Terrified of what might happen if they stopped, Daphne was a master of psychological control, making it clear that those who failed to pay her would face dire spiritual consequences. The pressure was building to a breaking point, setting the stage for a tragedy that would shock the entire city of Arlington. On the morning of the 10th of June, the year 2012, the quiet of the early hours was broken when emergency dispatchers received a call at 7:29. The caller was Chow Tran, his voice trembling with anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. He explained that his teenage son had gone to knock on their apartment door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside, growing increasingly worried when they noticed that one of the apartment windows was open and things inside did not look right. When the responding police officers arrived at the apartment complex, they found the family waiting outside, too terrified to enter the home themselves. Officer Weller, a veteran officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to step through the front door. The interior of the apartment was in complete disarray, bearing all the hallmarks of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, belongings were scattered across the floor, and a heavy, unsettling silence hung in the air. Officer Weller moved cautiously through the rooms, calling out for Long and Hong, but there was no response. After checking the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, He entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared empty. He turned to leave, but as his flashlight swept across the wall, he noticed dark hand smudges next to a small closet door. A sense of apprehension washed over him, a deep instinct telling him that something terrible lay behind that door. Taking a deep breath, Officer Weller opened the closet. Inside, he made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were inside the small space, their bodies bound tightly with duct tape. Their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped, and there was no sign of life. In that silent, tragic moment, the officer knew that their journey to find the American dream had ended in an unspeakable nightmare. The news of the double homicide sent shockwaves through the Arlington Police Department. Homicide investigators, including seasoned detectives with over 2 decades of experience, arrived to process the scene. It was a highly violent and chaotic environment. The physical evidence suggested that an attack had occurred the moment the elderly couple had walked through their front door, with signs of a struggle near the entrance on the carpet and against the furniture. As the forensic teams began their meticulous work, they uncovered several items that seemed designed to paint a specific picture. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a beer bottle left in plain sight. To the investigators, this bandana looked almost like a calling card, pointing directly toward the active street gangs known to operate in the region. However, the detectives remained skeptical. In their years of investigating major crimes, they had learned that when a crime scene appears too perfect, too staged, it often means the perpetrator is trying to direct attention away from the truth. The level of violence and the specific nature of the crime felt deeply personal, far exceeding the typical patterns of a standard robbery. They collected every piece of potential evidence, including the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers, and swabs of the duct tape, hoping that science would eventually provide the answers. In the days following the tragedy, the detectives focused on interviewing the family members to understand who might have wanted to harm the gentle, hard-working couple. Chow Tran served as the primary spokesperson, cooperating fully and providing an airtight alibi for himself and the rest of the family. He explained that on the night of the incident, they had all been celebrating Long's birthday at a family gathering,